This Sunday on Capital Connection, cannabis comes to Illinois.
Well, it's a wonderful day because they finally legalized it in Illinois.
Now, law enforcement prepares to crack down how you could still get in trouble for carrying cannabis in your car.
The presence in what would be considered an illegal containers or no container would be enough to be able to get into, be able to search that vehicle.
Plus, the biggest political battle in 2020, the fight over the future of the state's income tax.
Is that while we may have a flat tax, we actually have a graduated structure in reality.
The president of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce challenges Governor Pritzker's push to raise taxes on the rich. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol, this is your Capital Connection.
Welcome to the first edition of Capital Connection in this new year and the first in a new decade. I'm Mark Maxwell. With the new year brought with it a new birth of freedom in Illinois, the freedom to get high. The rollout of recreational marijuana drew big crowds and long lines at pot shops across Illinois Wednesday morning as customers stood outside hoping they could get their hands on some before the limited supply ran dry.
I might try one. It's legal in Illinois.
Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton was one of the first customers to buy legal marijuana in Illinois.
We know that people had been using cannabis previously, and now it will be safe, it will be regulated.
Her former House colleague, Jahan Gordon Booth, predicted the social stigma associated with cannabis won't last long.
People that participate in this can participate in using a product in the very same way that you would go to a wine store and get your local Cabernet on a Friday night.
But addiction recovery expert Zach Levin told WGN's Patrick Elwood marijuana may present other health risks yet unknown, just like cigarettes and alcohol.
Legalizing recreational cannabis use means that it is then safe to consume. I think we're at a similar place as where we were with nicotine. If you look at nicotine use in the past 10 to 20 years, there's been a new perception of the health risks. Yet, in this country, physicians used to tell their patients to smoke cigarettes. Past 10 to 20 years, now we understand there's a lot of health risks associated with that.
For decades, medical experts lacked enough data to do much meaningful research on the long-term effects of marijuana. But now, an industry that was already thriving underground is coming into the clear light of day with an eye-popping first day of sales. On New Year's Day, long lines circled cannabis dispensaries in Collinsville.
It was absolute madness. It was thousands of people here.
In Champaign.
I know yesterday some of the people said that it was a 9-hour wait.
In Canton.
Prohibition is finally over.
And in Chicago.
We waited in line for about 4 hours.
All told, the first day of legal pot sales delivered a windfall for a budding industry.
I'm pleased to announce that there were 77,128 transactions yesterday and sales totals of $3,176,256.71.
That is a lot of green and a lot of taxes.
We were told that the real revenue estimate's probably going to be in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million directly to the city.
Well, the taxes are outrageous, but you're going to pay for that because we've got a lot of stuff to fix in Illinois, but it's a good way to start it. And I went there, it was quite a bit difference in price, and then I found out what they were taxing in here, but it's still worth it to be able to do it, legally within the lines and not feel bad about it.
Kind of expected it. I checked it online, saw what the rules were, saw what the percentage for tax rate for each item was. I came back a second time, so obviously it wasn't too bad for me. You can't keep buying from the streets if you want to support legalizations.
As pot shops start to collect sales taxes, the state gears up for a second wave of recreational licenses. This time set aside for business owners or employees from communities most harmed in the war on drugs.
If we did what every other state did, which was just open the door wide open and allow anybody, just hand out licenses, that there would only be a select number of folks who got them. This is very intentionally different. So the application process is designed to actually incentivize equity applicants, people who were from communities and most impacted by the prohibition of the activity that we've just made legal.
And Governor Pritzker pardoned 11,000 people with low-level cannabis convictions, the first wave of many in a push to clear nearly 800,000 records, and to give people who were busted for pot a fresh start.
Have the state's attorneys in all the counties who are being notified of, everybody that's got convictions and encouraged to take those to their courts to have those records expunged.
The new legal industry does come with some hurdles at the counter.
It's been done before with the state and everything because everything in Illinois is so regulated. So you can't just let people in. You actually have to go through a state portal and make sure that they're an adult.
They're queued inside. Once they're checked in, ID is scanned and they're in. We're having them fill out their order form to help smooth that process and streamline that process and then get it back to the vault where we dispense the medicine and try to keep the line queuing as seamless as possible.
But once customers left the store with product in hand, they couldn't stop raving.
Well, it was a wonderful day because they finally legalized it in Illinois.
I'm very happy. Very happy. We've been waiting for a long time.
Being a boomer, I never thought this day would come.
I think there's a lot of good personal benefits for it, obviously from the medical side and then just for recreation. I think it's a God-given right.
The convenience to be able to walk in and just get what you need and not worry about getting in trouble for it all the time is really great.
I really just love to get high and relax.
If you do decide to get high and you need to go somewhere, get a designated driver. That's the warning from the Department of Transportation. And from law enforcement, who pulled people over for driving under the influence in the western suburbs of Chicago. WGN's Marcella Raymond reports police in Carroll Stream are already testing cheek swabs as an alternative to drawing your blood.
Keep it there for 5 minutes so the saliva builds. Then the tester will show if you have THC in your system. 10 nanograms is the legal limit, just like 0.08 is the legal limit for alcohol. The results aren't admissible in court yet, and it's a voluntary test. Carroll Stream has done 15 so far this year and is still waiting for some results.
When we come back, could blood tests put sober drivers behind bars for DUI? We talk to law enforcement about their plans to crack down on cannabis in cars. That's next.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Police officers across the state are on the lookout for anyone behind the wheel who might be high in this new year and new era of legal recreational marijuana. But you don't have to be high for police officers to search your vehicle or even ask you to take a blood test. Earlier this week, I sat down with the executive director of the Illinois Sheriff's Association to find out how law enforcement is preparing to grapple with legal weed. As of New Year's Day, roughly 9.5 million adults in Illinois will be legally allowed to purchase, carry, and consume recreational marijuana.
That's correct. Anyone over 21 years of age.
Anyone over 21 years of age. That's a lot of product, and that's a lot of people introduced into our highways, our homes, and everywhere in Illinois. How well prepared are law enforcement to handle this new transition?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't think we're as well prepared nearly as we'd like to be. And part of the issue is that we don't have, the resources. We've not had the resources for quite some time in this state as law enforcement as a whole, but particularly as it relates to traffic safety issues and being able to determine the level of intoxication by folks that may very well consume cannabis. We have no standardized testing for that. So the only thing that we have to go by right now is standardized field sobriety testing that we could give somebody that we think is suspected under the influence of cannabis. And then ultimately, if we feel like they are, then we could take them to the hospital and do a blood draw on them.
What does that let's walk through that. What does that field testing look like?
It would be the same as of right now.
Walk a line?
It would be the walk and turn, the one-leg stand. It would be the same tests that we use for people that we suspect are under the influence of alcohol today. The indicators may not all be the same, but we certainly would use the same standardized field sobriety testing that we do for alcohol. The indicators that we would look for are, bloodshot eyes, the smell of cannabis coming from, a vehicle or from an individual, glassy eyes, impaired driving that they may have, whatever the reason for the traffic stop was.
So let's walk through that process step by step so we can try and determine some examples and see how this might play out in real time. So let's say a sheriff's deputy pulls someone over for speeding, but as they're interacting with the driver, they happen to smell the scent of cannabis or marijuana in the vehicle. Is the presence of that smell right now, is that enough to justify probable cause for the sheriff to search the rest of the vehicle, have the driver come out of the car. Is that enough right now?
Yes.
Even though it's legal?
Correct. It is enough today, prior to January 1st, and it will be enough after January 1st as well. Because as the law is stated right now, if you're going to have possession of cannabis, that possession has to be in an odorless container if you are in a vehicle. So by the mere fact that I can smell it is probable cause for me to be able to search that vehicle.
So one step removed from that, say the same interaction, a deputy pulls someone over for speeding, they don't smell anything, but they happen to observe in the back seat sits an odorless container, sealed, locked, but it's clearly labeled marijuana. You've seen it, but it appears closed and it appears to be under the legal limit. Is that probable cause, the presence of the marijuana in the vehicle, to search the vehicle?
In a sealed container with no odor coming from it? No. That is not probable cause at that point.
Interesting. So there are some marijuana shops that are instructing their customers, or they plan to instruct customers, put it in your trunk. Just don't even flirt with it.
And I think from a law enforcement perspective, we would certainly agree with that, because then that puts it out of the reach of everyone. So if the driver can't get to it, the passenger can't get to it, then you've eliminated that probable cause for us to be able to search the vehicle at that point in time by it sitting in your trunk, because we don't even know it's there.
So if an officer sees a sealed, odorless container in the back seat and still uses that to take the driver out and search the vehicle, that's a violation?
I would not encourage, based on how the law reads to me today, I do not believe that you have probable cause to search that vehicle based on the fact that you cannot smell that. You simply see it in a sealed, odorless container. That's not a violation. They legally purchased that, and it's out of the reach of the driver.
You mentioned something a moment ago about road safety, and I know many people in our audience and across the state of Illinois are very interested to see how this evolves. You mentioned a possibility of dragging a driver to a hospital for a blood test. Mm-hmm. That's a bit more invasive, and it interrupts a person's schedule a bit more than just a speeding ticket. How is that you have to take them to a hospital? What if you're in rural downstate and the nearest hospital is an hour and a half away?
Well, I mean, that could certainly be something that you could face. The other thing that you could do too is you could rely on, EMTs to come in to draw blood for you. But our only way to be able to prove it, that it's actually in the blood, if you are willing to give the test, because in Illinois we have what's called implied consent. So by getting a driver's license, you have given implied consent that you will submit to voluntary testing, either for alcohol or drugs, if so requested by the officer that is stopping you at that time.
But blood or urine tests are more invasive to a person's privacy than just a breathalyzer.
That's
right?
Correct.
So this is impeding further. It's coming into closer contact with a person's civil liberties, their personal privacy. And a blood test is actually less accurate, according to the National Institutes of Health, than a saliva test or just a cheek swab. So why go for example, if you take a blood test and someone has smoked or consumed marijuana days ago, the THC could still be present in their blood. How would you even know if they were actually high behind the wheel?
Because the level of nanograms that has to be in one's blood for whole blood is 5 nanograms. So when you test for that, that's the test level that you would be looking for. Now, is it the only thing? No. You're going to be looking for other indicators that might show impairment as well. But just like you could for alcohol, the example would be is that the legal limit for alcohol in the state of Illinois is 0.08. Mm-hmm. However, if you show impairment that somebody may be at a 0.06, they can still be arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol, because there's a window there that you could prove the impairment, plus you could base it on the driving that they're participating in on the roadways.
If a saliva test scientifically is determined to be more accurate, why then go to the blood testing?
Because we have no validated saliva test anywhere in the country right now. There are saliva tests that are being tested.
In Michigan, they're using them.
They're using them on an experimental basis, but they've not passed the Fry test, nor they have validated roadside safety test yet for us. We would love to have those as soon as possible. The other issue, at least at this point in time, based on the models that we've seen, is the fact that they are very cost prohibitive in terms of being able to do the test.
When we come back, a look at the biggest political fight on the horizon in 2020, the ballot question in November. Should Illinois adopt a progressive income tax? What the business community has to say to Governor Pritzker's idea. That's next.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
In his first year in office, Governor Pritzker accomplished a great many of the wish list items he had when he came into office, but his biggest campaign promise as of now remains unfinished. In November 2020, you'll get a say on that, whether or not Illinois should change from a flat tax to a progressive income tax. And already, Governor Pritzker has dumped $5 million of his own personal money into a campaign fund that will try and convince voters to approve of that decision. Joining us now is the president of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, Todd Meisch. Good to have you with us.
Great to be back.
And Todd, I understand that you and the Chamber strongly oppose and have opposed even putting this question to the voters. Now you oppose and are hope to persuade voters to reject it. Why?
Sure, because we think the flat tax is really the fair tax. The proponents have tried to grab that mantle, but a flat tax is what is fair. The more you make, the more you pay. The less you make, the less you pay. And it's very important to point out that a lot of Illinoisans pay no income tax whatsoever. So that's one of our main points we're going to be driving home, is that while we may have a flat tax, we actually have a graduated structure in reality.
But it seems that House Democrats and House Republicans, and in the Senate as well, a number of lawmakers in both parties have agreed that raising the flat tax from 3.75% to 4.95%, as we did recently in 2017, had the effect of accelerating outmigration, especially of people who make less than $50,000 a year. Those people who have less disposable income have to pay more income tax, and that has accelerated, to the opinion of many lawmakers here, the outmigration of people who make that level. So I guess, how is that fair?
That sounds like a convenient argument. I don't think anybody can really document that. People have been leaving, but I think it's more about economic opportunity. They see better jobs. They see a better future for their children in other states. The notion that that increase is the reason, that's a convenient narrative for certain people that want to go ahead and increase taxes on the entrepreneurial class, the people that create jobs, the people who have been successful, the people who have worked hard for their entire lives to get where they are, to go ahead and make some money. That's much, much more likely to lead to outmigration and decreased tax revenues over the long term.
So decreased tax revenues is interesting because Governor Pritzker has said he wants to grow the economy, he wants to be a pro-business governor, and he wants to also stabilize what he sees as an unfair tax structure now, where people who make north of $250,000 a year pay the same rate or the same percentage as someone who makes, minimum wage. He says that's unfair, and he wants to fix what he calls a structural imbalance. So as the economy grows, it doesn't require people who make less to pay a larger share of their income.
Well, here's a really important thing that leaves out, and I really like the governor. I believe that he believes this. We're just on different sides policy-wise. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, a lot of those people making minimum wage, not only do they not pay any income tax whatsoever, a lot of them qualify for the earned income tax credit, and they get a check from the state.
Surprise to them, it comes out of their paycheck every 2 weeks.
Their balance is zero at the end of the day, and many of them, if they qualify for the earned income tax credit, actually get money from the state to go ahead and stabilize their revenues and their finances.
Through anti-poverty measures or...
That's really important to know. So if you just go ahead and ignore the fact we've got an awful lot of programs that are funded by the relatively small number of people that pay the vast majority of income taxes, and to help people at the lower end, you're just missing really the real story. And the reality is that we've already got a graduated structure, even with the flat rate.
That's an interesting and a true fact that is often missed in this debate, is that the wealthiest among us, the 1% or the top 10%, however you want to describe them, they pay, in many cases, the lion's share of the total, especially at the federal level, mm-hmm. of the total tax that comes in. But that's simply a product of the fact that they have so much money. Certainly you don't deny the income inequality gap that has grown from over the last 40 or 50 years as the people with the most money are getting it, and they're acquiring more and more wealth at a rate much faster than people are leaving poverty.
Well, there are two ways to look at that. Whether I think in the business community it's a tax on success, But the other thing is that the majority of your viewers are going to care about is that those are the people creating jobs. They're acquiring money because they've created jobs, they've grown their business, they're out there stimulating the economy. And it's trying to create a disconnect between the success that fuels the economy, that helps everybody in the middle, even the lower realms, try and move on up, and punishing them is just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said a tax on success, and then you just used the word to punish them. That's an interesting dichotomy. I think Senator Elizabeth Warren, running for president, would probably agree with you that it is a tax on success. In her campaign messaging, she said that the people who do provide those jobs, but also make that wealth, owe a certain debt of gratitude to the people who built the roads and the people who secured the neighborhoods, the staff, the teachers who educated their workforce. This is a part of her sort of political rhetoric, but she's saying that, hey, it's great you made all that money, but now pay back, and through the form of taxes, a higher rate to continue that sort of social or governmental investment that builds up everything around us. It seems that a top candidate for president says, yeah, you should tax success, and here's why. What do you make of her opinion there?
Well, the first thing is they're already paying the lion's share of income taxes. So how much is enough? So that's the first most important thing. And I'm not the first person to say it, but when government taxes something, you generally get less of it. So if you go ahead and really put on what I would, again, repeat, punishing tax rates on people that are creating jobs, creating wealth, you're going to get less of that. The capital will move from wherever those tax locations are that have punishing rates, and you're going to get even less of it. So I think that I'm not the first person to say it. If government wants more of something, you don't raise taxes on it.
All right, Todd Meisch, the president of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us.
No, it's great to be here.
And we're back in a moment.